Okay, so here we are back inside Photoshop, and now we're ready to start naming our slices that we've already created in the previous movie, and we're going to export them out as individual images. So what we're going to do to start off with is make sure we have our slice select tool selected, and then we'll just start right here with the first slice. We're going to select that slice so that we get the bounding box with the handles, and then we have a couple options. We can right click on it and then go to Edit Slice Options, and that will bring up the Slice Options dialog box. We can double click on it, and that'll also just bring the box up automatically. Or we can come up here to the menu bar up top and hit this little icon, and that will also bring up the Slice Options dialog box. Alright, so in this dialog box you'll see that there are several options that we have that we can set. The most important one that we're going to look at is the name option, or the name attribute. And you'll see that Photoshop has already given it a name, and it's called it vector test _02. And it gets that name from the name of my Photoshop document, my file name, which is vector test, as you can see right up here, vectortest.psd. And then it gets the number 02 from the actual slice number, which you can see right here, the 02. So if I cancel out of this, go over to my About slice and double click on it, you'll see that it's vector test _04. And then the forums is vector test _05. Now that's all fine and dandy and great that Photoshop creates a name for us, but it's not very descriptive, and I'm not really going to know what vector test _02 is when it comes to using it in my web page. So I'm going to rename it, and I'm just going to call this home. Just like so. You'll also see that there's attributes for a URL. So if I want to make it a link, I can give it a URL if I click on it. There's a target attribute for frames, or if I want the link to open in the same page or a different page. There's a message text and an alt tag. And then you have the dimensions, the X and Y coordinates of the top left-hand corner of the slice. That's where these come from. So the top left-hand corner of my slice is at the coordinates 0 on the X coordinate scale, and Y is at 75. And that's this little corner right here. I already showed you with the guides how on this side it's 0, and this guide is at 75. Of course, it has a width of 130 and a height of 50 pixels. We already talked about that. We're not going to use these particular attributes here in this dialog box, because we're actually going to set these attributes inside Dreamweaver, or if you're not using Dreamweaver, it's going to be your text editor when we get into actually creating the web page. So that's all we're going to do in here is just rename the slice, and we're just going to give it a descriptive name that we'll know, what that slice is. So I'm going to click OK. Now, what's important here is that you make sure you only have one slice selected. So I'm going to deliberately select. If you use layer-based slices, all of your slices will be selected after creating those layer-based slices. So what I'm going to do is deliberately select more than one slice, and then just double-click. It's not going to do it. That's fine. I'll deliberately select them, and then there we go. I'll open my dialog box with the button, and I'm just going to give it a name. The next one I want to do is the About slice, so I'm going to call this About. Oops, I can't spell today. About, and then I'm just going to click OK. And then if I unselect all my slices, and then go in and name my forum slice individually, you'll see that it's already named About, and that's because I had all those other slices selected. So I'm going to rename that to Forum. I'll rename this to Train, use a little shorthand, and I'll rename this to Contact. And then my last one is my footer. Of course, it's still vector test 09, and I'll name it footer. You'll see it's 800 pixels wide by 85 pixels high, and it starts at 0 and 515, and that's fine. And that's it for naming. It's a pretty simple process, not much to it. And like I said, don't worry about the other attributes, because you're going to take care of those inside your text editing program, or web page design program, whatever you're going to use. Just worry about naming them inside Photoshop. That's the important part, naming. Alright, so once they're named, we have to export them. So we're going to go File, and normally if you're used to working with print documents or just saving out as JPEGs, you would go Save As. But we're actually going to save files for the web. So we're going to use the special Save for Web and Devices Save As feature. And this brings up the Save for Web and Devices dialog box. And it's a little bit too big. Let me bring it down just a little bit if I can. It doesn't want to shrink for me, so it's So right now I have my 2 up. You can do a 4 up preview, and these preview windows come in handy if you've never used the Save for Web and Devices dialog box. I'm not going to go into all of it because it's very intricate and very detailed, and it's very awesome for web designers. But basically what it is you have 4 different previews, and you can set different file types, different properties for each file type, and get different views of your image as different file types. Like if I want this home slice to be a GIF file, I'll select GIF from the drop-down menu, so I have different file types. Make my adjustments to it: 16 colors, 100% dither, no matte. Transparency is not a big deal. I don't need transparency. Make sure I have my color mode set. But say I wanted to compare the GIF format, which is a 1.148 kilobyte file size, and downloads at 1 second over 56.6 kilobit per second connection, which I can change my download speed if I want to from here. This is really handy for web designers. They can check the download speed of their images, depending on the user's internet connection speeds, which is really great. But let's say I want to see this is a GIF in here. I can come over here and make these maybe ping 24s, and then make these JPEGs and compare the file size. Well, if it's a GIF, it's 1.148 kilobytes. If it's a ping 24, it's going to be 3.809 kilobytes. And if it's a JPEG, it's going to be 2.133 kilobytes. So right now the GIF file is looking the best. But I can always come in here with my JPEG and say, well, let's bring down the quality. Let's not use a high quality. Let's try medium. And you can see, you might not be able to see it as well as me, but of course there's some artifacting going on in here, and that's not so good, so let's go high. Let's not go 60, let's go high at maybe 50. Let's try that. And that doesn't look too bad. But my GIF file size is still going to be smaller, 1.148 kilobytes versus 1.7. So that's what these preview windows are for, and you can tell which preview window you have selected by this little gray border that's around the window. And because I've already done this before, I'm going to use the GIF format for all of my slices here, but you can see that you can change all kinds of options that you have, diffusion, your diffusion type, whether you want transparency or not. It doesn't really affect the file size. You have a web snap slider, how because the web uses certain color palettes, and you can snap it 100% to web colors, or not. You have a compression ratio that you can increase. Of course, the more compression you use, the starting to get some artifacting in there on my drop shadow, so I'm not going to mess with that. And all that's just to serve to decrease the file size, but I mean at 1 kilobyte, that's not bad. So I'm just going to make sure all these are selected. I don't need transparency, and just make sure they're all GIFs. And the last one's going to be my footer, which I'm going to have to do it as a JPEG, and you'll notice I'm just going to zoom in here with my magnifying glass. You'll see there's all kinds of artifacting going on with the drop shadow. No good. So the GIF is not working, so I'm just going to switch this over to a JPEG, and you'll see it smooths right out. And I do get a little artifacting here, so I'm going to kind of bump this up to very high, just to kind of get rid of that. And that's the way it works for the web. You've got to make that distinction between get back to 100% here. Make that distinction between file size and image quality, and that is the bane of web design with images. Okay, so that's the basics of the Save for Web and Devices dialog box. You want to make sure that your image quality and your file size are acceptable, and then once they are, you've got all your slices set up the way you need them to be. Of course, I got 5 GIF files and 1 JPEG. And you'll see this is 13K, so it's going to be a little bit bigger. These are obviously all under 2K, which is good. It's terrific. Alright, so once that's done, we're just going to click on the Save button, and then it's going to bring us to the Save Optimized As window. And we have some options in here as well. Right now I just want images only, but I have the option to do HTML and images only, or HTML only. And later on I'll do another video on the HTML and images side, and we'll work with that. The default settings for right now, I'm just going to leave them as they are, but you can go in, we're just going to leave it as default settings. And I want to make sure I have all user slices selected. I can do all slices, all user slices, or just the selected ones. I want to do all user slices, and then I'll hit Save, and Photoshop saves it out. You're like, well, where did it save it to? Well, let me open up Windows Explorer here, drag this in. Whoop, just lost it. Let's try that again. Hit my back button, go into my vector test, and you'll see there's an images folder in here that Photoshop created for me, and here are all of my slices already saved out for me, all individually. And that is the basics of slicing and exporting in Photoshop. Next, we will go into Dreamweaver and start to lay out our page.